Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. I am Jon Santiago, your host, and each week speak to content creators about their stories, strategies, and experiences of building an online audience through video. And it is that time again, the third time again since we started this show, where we are just going to recap the last 10 episodes. Joining me, as always, on these recap episodes is my producer, Nikki Vicente.
Hey guys, it's me again.
It's Nikki. Yes, she's back. And we are just looking back at the season that was. It was a very eclectic mix of people.
Yeah.
I think, we had everyone from a guy who was on a mission to meet 10,000 people to a personal finance vlogger in Scotland to an astrophysicist.
Yes.
Wow, that's going to be interesting to talk about. So there's so many things that happened in this season, but let's start with the first guest of the season. As I briefly alluded to, Rob Lawless. He is the man on a mission to make 10,000 friends here. I don't know how long it's going to take him. He when I first met him, he was going to be he planned to be doing this for a very long time, like deep into his 30s and maybe into his early 40s or so. But I think he's more than like 25% of the way through. And for anybody not familiar with Rob is he started this project that was kind of based on a mix between Malcolm Gladwell's concept. It was a concept that was written about in his book called, 10,000 Hours to Mastery, and Humans of New York, the popular Instagram account where there are stories told about people from New York, and now it's gone global. And so, yeah, Rob is a very interesting guy. He's just been meeting a bunch of people, and he's trying to really promote this idea of human connection. And I've known Rob now for the last few years, and I had the chance to catch up with him again for this episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. What were your thoughts on that episode, Nikki?
Yeah, the last time I checked his account, he's at 4,460 something. And I actually set up a meeting with him. Yes. I was his 399th friend, I think. And you were his 1,202nd friend. It's just crazy to think that he's met thousands of people through this project. And the thing that stuck with me the most from that episode that you guys did was, I think you asked him, after meeting these, how many people, thousands of people, what was the one lesson that he's learned so far? And he says that the one thing that's common among humans, aside from, family and love and all that, he said the one thing that's common is that we don't know what we're doing. Like, no one knows what the heck they're doing. And hearing that from someone who's met thousands of people from different parts of the globe is personally very comforting to me, because I, most of the time, don't know what I'm doing with my life. So I'm like, okay, so other people feel this too. So just hearing it from someone who's talked to so many people and like knowing that that's what he got, that's his takeaway from everyone's lives that he's met so far. And before meeting up with him for our meeting outside of this podcast, like, he sent me this link, kind of like a prep of what to expect during the conversation. And I'm guessing this is what happens with every one of his meetings. It's like everyone, I guess, expects that it's going to be an interview. When it's not, it's more of a conversation when you can ask him questions and then he asks you questions. It's not like just one-sided. It's just amazing that he's really dedicated his life full-time to this project, because he has such a passion for uncovering the gift that is human connection.
What new things have you learned in the time that has passed since we met about human beings in general and people, and even about yourself?
Yeah, I think I am a much more mature and aware person. Not that I wasn't before, but I just feel like I have seen society from so many different angles that I now take all of that into account. So I'll try to explain a little bit. But thematically, I always say the biggest thing I've learned from my project is that no one really knows what they're doing. Everyone is just doing the best they can with the resources that they have. And it's that people have a lot of depth to them. Because I talk to people for an hour at a time, my mind is kind of framing people in that way whenever I interact with them. I think the norm is for people to just think of people surface level, like as they are in that moment. because that's all they see them, and they don't think about beyond the fact that we're doing a podcast together. Like, you probably have 10 other things that you have on your to-do list that you're thinking about getting done. And then outside of the podcast, like I'm flying back to Long Beach tomorrow to be with my friend, and like working on all these different things behind the scenes with the project. So I think I just think about people with that depth more often now. I understand that there's so many people have been through such crazy things. It's just so often, I'm 30, my parents are still alive, still together. I have met so many people through my project who are younger than me, who've lost parents or who've lost siblings. And I think that's one of the most striking things for me is when we're young, I think we assume that we're always going to have our loved ones with us, and we just don't think about it because it's sad to do that. But when I've interacted with some of these other people, like in the last 2 months alone, I met 2 girls. One was 26 and has lost both of her parents already. One was 22 and lost both of her parents already. And I'm like, I can't imagine the maturity that you get through that, or like the growing up that you have to do when at such a young age, these like figures in your life are taken away from you. So I'm just more aware of that. And I think that impacts what I'm grateful for and what I place value in.
Our next guest on season 3 was the couple Alice and Clark, aka That High Couple. So if a discussion about marijuana and drugs bothers you, you might want to skip through this section, because they're YouTubers. They're a couple based in Los Angeles who have been able to build a following around content in the marijuana niche. And it's, you know, it's because it's changing. Obviously, here in the United States, it's becoming legalized in many states here in the country. And so it was really fun to chat with them about how they've been able to get to where they are today. And they're still very much like many other creators at their level, still kind of like running things individually on their own, but they're finding ways to outsource and hand off certain responsibilities that may be important to the process of content creation, but at the same time, they know that there are other people that can do them better. So they're actually a client of ours at Video Husky. They've been one of our clients for a long time supporter of the product, just because editing is hard to do. It's
right.
not, it takes a lot of time on top of shooting and filming things at the same time.
Yeah, I feel like this is a very common thing among all the people that you've interviewed on the show. Like, but their opinion on it varies. I noticed, like, some are more willing to delegate. Some are like, they wanna like keep it to themselves first and like sort of control their own editing and stuff. But yeah, eventually, if you do want to grow, I noticed like these creators realize at one point that, yeah, I have more important things to do. So I'd rather just delegate this to someone who knows, who will do a better job at editing. And Alice and Clark are one of those creators. And I think this is one of my favorite Videocraft Show episodes. Just because you can feel their vibe, even if it's just through video. I feel like they're just such happy people to be around. You know what I mean? Like, I think you guys were quoting that Los Angeles Times article.
Yeah,
article.
There was a great article. There was a great feature piece written about them in the LA Times back in February of this year, 2021.
Yeah.
We could link to that again in the show notes of this particular episode. Yeah, they were described. I remember one word from that particular article. the journalist described them as ebullient. I'm like, what is ebullient? I don't even know that
I had to
word.
Google what that meant. I was like, what does this mean? But it sounds fancy, and so I was. But when I did watch a lot of their videos and your conversation with them, they did have an energy about them, and they just seem so easy to talk to. Yeah, and it was so funny the way they met, how they were just like game to just smoke up during their date and everything on the first date. And it's just amazing how they built a channel out of this common passion of theirs. And at first they struggled to find a niche. Like they were doing Star Wars stop motion stuff and then cat review stuff, and then they finally found their happy place, which is the topic of cannabis. And it's such a unique topic too, because they're like 100% focused on it, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, it's also challenging in the sense that it's a very sensitive category to be creating content around, right? Like, I personally think that the cannabis niche is going to gonna be looking at this like in 50 years, the way that people look at alcohol these days, where it's just so widely available. You know, there's mass marketing and advertising of it everywhere. Culturally, it's like acceptable that everyone can drink alcohol if they want to.
Yep. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, we're just not there yet. And I think that we're going to get to that point. But right now, it's very difficult to navigate that because there are a lot of restrictions that platforms like YouTube put on creators like Alice and Clark. And the rules change all the time. And it's always changing all the time for people who aren't even in like very sensitive niches. Now imagine if you're creating content around something that is as sensitive of a topic as cannabis.
So then we realized, okay, we want to keep being creative. We like having side projects to do outside of work and something to work on. But what else can we do? And it has kind of hit us that, we go to a lot of cannabis events. We've both been card-carrying cannabis consumers like since we met, since 18 pretty much. So why don't we just bring a camera along and start recording some of these events that we go to? Maybe we try some product reviews of this. We're both smoking every day and doing this. So why not just record it?
And I even remember when we made that decision, it was like, because previously we were just trying to chase a lot of like views and engagement of like, oh, cat toys are popular. Star Wars is the new like trilogies coming out. That's going to be a popular topic. But it wasn't until we started like really focusing on what are the things that make us passionate about just continuing to do this kind of content that it was like, oh yeah.
And then of course that's the one thing that clicked when we're not actually chasing views or trying to chase the success of it, when we're just trying to, okay, we're going to push record on what feels authentic and good for us and still try and be creative with it. It's great that that's the thing that we found the most success with.
Was there any reservation before you decided to start making content around cannabis where you thought, there might be, even though we love this and we're passionate about it, there might be some challenges here just because it's drug-related content?
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't like an instant, like there was a light bulb moment that maybe, this is what we should do because we're passionate about this. But it definitely took some reservations for like, okay, do I want to have my face and my name and everything of me smoking weed on the internet out there? Because a lot of people do find this as a very controversial topic and not everyone feels the same way I do about it. So a lot of thought went into starting this channel before we did. And it is unfortunate that a lot of people do have negative opinions about it and that it is so controversial, but we realize that it's something that has brought so much positivity into our lives and our relationship. And it even really started as like, as I said earlier, the first two channels that we made were like, okay, how can we get views? How can we be successful? This was more just like, what's a fun side passion project that we can be working on the weekends? So we're not just sitting at home watching TV and stuff. I want to be doing something. I want to be productive. And realizing, okay, yeah, I think I could do this with cannabis, but it wasn't like an instantaneous, hello, I'm Alice, ready to be lady weed for you,
The third guest in this season of the Videocraft Show was Jared Amin Gillette, better known as Puting Pinoy. He's an American expat who actually relocated to the Philippines not too long ago. I think it was, from what I recall, he had relocated to the Philippines, I think in 2019 on a more permanent basis. He was somebody who he originally came to the Philippines as a missionary when he was still a believer in the Mormon faith. A lot of Mormon, fun fact for people out there who are unaware, there are a lot of Mormon missionaries that go to the Philippines actually and do missionary work out there. And so he was one of those people. But this was an interesting conversation because, unlike other creators that I've spoken to, I've spoken to like a wide spectrum of content creators. Jared is a good guy, and he definitely is still somebody who's still trying to crack the code of like, how can I actually leverage this into like a career that pays me money for myself? I think he's cracked the code of how to like engage an audience and build an audience and get people watching him. It's just a matter of like figuring out for him, like, well, how can I actually like earn a living from this? And this is something that I think many creators struggle with in general.
Yeah, I remember that part of your conversation too. He was talking about he has been struggling with being compensated for his work, because a lot of people in the Philippines offer just exposure for compensation, which of course is not enough. That's exposure is not gonna put food on the table. And I can relate to that because I live in the Philippines, and there are a lot of people who are offering like creatives who offer free work just so that they get experience. And it's a lot of clients too who are looking for creatives who are just offering exposure, that you'll get experience from this, but it's not enough at the end of the day. And he was talking about that too, that it's not enough, and it's just common here in the Philippines. So as creatives, I think more and more creatives now are standing up for what they deserve, monetarily speaking, that they deserve to be paid and stuff like that. And there's definitely a struggle to kind of find your footing and figure out how to get monetized and actually have like a sustainable income from YouTube. So yeah, I get the struggle there. And the fact that he, like, doing YouTube is hard enough as it is, but the fact that he uprooted his life and moved to a new country, like, it's a whole new thing, I think, because there's that struggle of, like, adjusting to the culture and being around new people, and then on top of that, also building a YouTube channel. So, yeah, it's definitely difficult and challenging, I believe.
Yeah, granted, I think I got the sense that his heart was in the right place, because he's not like, one of the things that we talked about was that he is not there like other foreign vloggers or people not from the Philippines coming to the Philippines to just create content so that he can get easy views. Right? We talked about this topic of Pinoy baiting. It was a concept that I spoke about with Tom Kugler, past guest on the Videocraft Show as well, in the previous season. And his heart and his intentions are in the right place to kind of actually like engage with the culture in like an honest way, whereas like there are many vloggers out there who will, you know, come and then, you know, make a video about like the mega mall or something like that.
First time eating adobo.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, watch me eat balut or something like that. If you don't know what balut is, Google it, watch it on YouTube, and leave a comment. Let me know if you would actually eat balut.
I have come across situations too where somebody would ask you to do something or want you to be a part of something, but there's not really like a payoff for it. For instance, I was invited by somebody running a little concert thing, and I asked about like talent fees, and then they don't get back to you. You know what I mean? So I think that's another part of it, is like, you're afraid about what the response will be if you will like blow a potential opportunity. And I felt that had also happened early on as well, because I was invited to play a concert with like Morrissey and a couple other like big OPM names for like a 2,000 audience sort of thing. And I asked about a talent fee, and I didn't say a number or anything, but they seemed to shy away from that. Oh, we don't have a budget for that. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, I mean, that's fine, I'll still do it. But then their mind's already made up. Oh, he asked for a talent fee. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's very conflicting about how to navigate it for me, just based on what my experience has been. I need a win. I need a win or two under my belt for me to feel more confident in that, I feel. It's like, what wouldn't it have been better that I didn't get money on that show and performed, and then that's more exposure? You know, but at the same time, that's exactly what people exploit when it comes to creatives, you know?
Well, and you've already got
exposure.
Exactly, and you've already got enough exposure with, again, around 80,000 subscribers now, like thousands of people already watching your video. Like you already have the influence, and if anything, those people, those companies, they're benefiting more in a deal with you rather than you getting any benefit from them. It's not necessarily even a win-win situation. And I feel like that's where the tide, I think, is changing in this space, because creators, influencers, you know, what title people want to call themselves, they understand, like, people are starting to understand their worth. So Luke is better known as the Nomadic Gaijin, and he was the next guest that we had on this particular season of the podcast. He is an interesting guy. He was another guy who had uprooted himself, moved overseas from America, living in a foreign country, although he's been in Japan for much longer than Jared has been in the Philippines. I think Luke moved there pretty much like fresh out of college, and he seemed to be a guy who is already like in his mid to late 30s at this point. I could be wrong, but let me know if you were a fan of the Nomadic Gaijin on YouTube. But it was fun to talk to him, and he was like incredibly nervous to come on the show.
Was he?
He was really nervous, and the fun thing about this is that he sent me probably the most detailed prep for this interview that I've gotten from a guest, because usually I'll send a guest a message and say, hey, if you would like to share any interesting tidbits or notable pieces of information that would be worthy of touching on in the conversation, let me know. Like I'll drop that in. And he almost basically like wrote practically like like a bunch of interview questions for me to ask. Like there were just certain things that, especially with him, he's still relatively new. At this point, he's still under 3,000 subscribers on YouTube, I believe. So he's not yet at the magnitude where, there's all kinds of things written up about him that you could just find on Google compared to other YouTubers. But he's just a very down-to-earth guy, and he's doing really well right now in terms of, he seems to be very dedicated to live streaming, but he does have that community aspect down as a small YouTuber.
Yeah, and he seemed very like genuinely appreciative of the community that he's built. Like you can sense it from the way that he talks about his Discord community and the fact that he said that YouTube's like the best thing that's happened to him so far. And I actually joined his Discord community, and they're super active there. Like they're really dedicated to this community, and it's I can imagine that as a creator, like him having that sort of community of people to back him up and like tell him what he can do better, and just people who are willing to see him, who want to see him succeed. And he also mentioned that his followers give him tips on, hey, maybe you should go on Twitch, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. And his followers were the one who built the Discord community with the mods and stuff like that, the bots. And the way he talked about it, he seemed like he's really built a family of people around the world. He just seems so happy creating. Like when you watch his live streams, he's just walking around Japan. He's like, first and foremost, he's just happy to be in Japan, and then to be able to share that with the rest of the world. I feel like he's really doing his life's work, and he's really happy doing it.
For the longest time, pretty much since I've been here, I was creating mostly Facebook albums of all my adventures and trips. And I would go back to San Diego, and people I didn't know, just friends of friends or friends of the family or something, would come up to me and say, I look at all your albums. It's amazing. Keep doing that stuff. I would love to see more. And I'd hear that kind of stuff and thinking, oh, well, maybe I should put out more content, not just on Facebook where it's just like, like older generations checking it out. But, actually I should get out there and make and I've always wanted to make videos. I actually recorded a lot of stuff. I've had like those little tiny Canon cameras, like the little pocket cam, since I was in college, and I'd always be recording stuff at whatever it was, like 480p or something, or like whatever, less quality probably. And I found that I've always enjoyed that so much. So I thought, why don't I just start a channel? Why don't I get into that? And I've loved it. This is just probably my favorite part of my whole life so far is everything I've done with YouTube and the live streams. And it's such a great community.
Episode 27 of this very podcast featured a conversation with Jennifer Kempson, aka MamaFurFur. She is a personal finance vlogger based in the UK. I've spoken to a couple different people in like the finance niche. And she's kind of like the first in that whole like, here's how to invest your money, like personal finance type of thing. I mean, because we've had Kai Andrew and Rob Abasolo, who are both, they're more like real estate investing, but this woman was more focused on like traditional like equities investing in like in like the stock market and whatnot, and just managing your finances in like a reasonable way. I actually found her through a collaboration that she did with Graham Stephan, one of the biggest YouTubers in the personal finance space. His girlfriend did a video with her back in November of last year. And so they cross-promoted each other's channel. And I was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. I didn't know that finding financial freedom was like a thing in the UK as well. It's very big here in the United States. There's like a growing movement of it here in the US of people just, you know, wanting to save as much money as possible and like retire early or not necessarily have to worry about money. I think that's a dream for everybody around the world, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But it was a fun conversation to have her on the podcast and connect with her all the way from Scotland, where she's from.
Yeah, and me personally, coming into my late 20s now, like I'm thinking more and more about personal finance.
You're in your late 20s now?
Yeah, I'm stepping into 25 now, 26.
That's not late 20s, that's mid 20s.
Yeah, but after this, I'll be in my 26th year, so that's late 20s, right?
No, that's still mid 20s. It's not late 20s. I constitute late 20s is like 28,
29. Okay.
29.
Okay, so 24 to
26
26 is mid 20s. So I'm still safe.
Yes,
in the
you're still in your
range.
mid 20s.
Okay, so
Yeah.
now that I'm in my mid 20s range compared to me being in my early 20s period, I'm thinking more and more about money. So like I've been watching a lot of like personal finance videos and watching your conversation with MamaFurFur. I checked out some of her videos and it's like there's a lot of things to be learned and discovered when it comes to personal finance. There's a lot of terms I don't understand yet, and it's a whole world, to be honest, and it's daunting, and it's amazing that she was able to build this channel out of coming out of a struggle, out of debt, right? Because she and her husband had debt, and like that's when she started sort of reading books and figuring out personal finance. And she said like, what are the billionaires doing that I'm not doing? And that's such a like big question to ask yourself, because if I were to ask myself that, like, what are the billionaires doing that I'm not doing? A lot, to be honest. They're doing a lot that I'm not doing, and there's a lot to be learned when it comes to money and investing and the stock market and all that. It's a very daunting world to dive in, but the way that she talks about it makes it seem like it's accessible and reachable and learnable even for normal people. So yeah, it's amazing that she's making these videos.
Tell me about the decision to kind of niche down essentially into like money management.
So what happened in our life was actually we had debt. So my husband had £24,000 worth of consumer debt, and during this time of actually starting to make videos and experimenting, we were learning how to manage and pay off debt. And it was really one night I can remember sitting in front of a spreadsheet and going, I had no choice but to go back to work. I've just had my second child and I felt that I was stuck with money. And from growing up with money never being an issue really, I'd always lived cash only, to then feel like two people had to work full time and there was no option to be with our family. I was just like, right, there's got to be a better way. And from the couple of months before I started to focus on money, I then, as you say, deep dived. I really was immersing myself on, okay, how do people actually manage money? How do people, get out of debt? What's smart? What are the billionaires doing that I'm not doing around things? And that natural journey, devouring every single blog, every single video, every single book I could find on money and investing in businesses, then led me to realise that nobody was talking about these things really in the UK. Like back 3 years ago, it was very centric on a lot of US money creators. I wasn't even thinking about if they were male or female or anything. It just seemed to be a lot of male US voices. And so again, in a similar way, I thought, I really enjoy talking about money. I really want to start those conversations in the UK. And what if there's somebody else who is like me, who is struggling? So I'm going to teach them everything I'm learning about so that I can help them. That just in the same way, I'm 2 steps ahead. Can I help you? And we'll figure this out together.
Episode 28 featured a conversation with Dr. Rebecca Smethurst, aka Dr. Becky on YouTube. Now, she is an astrophysicist who is doing research. She's based in Oxford at Oxford University, and she was definitely, like I mentioned in the conversation, this is one of the first times I've gotten very like intimidated going into an interview. And you know, that's my secret weapon for anybody out there who wants to do a podcast too. You know, rather than like pretending that you're not nervous and not afraid, you might as well just like admit it and blurt it up front, because I think that, at least in my mind, I think it disarms the guest in a way that like gets us on like a human level, on a person to person level, where it's like, hey, even though I'm in the seat and I'm interviewing you, like, you know, we're eye to eye here. Like, I don't see myself above you just because I'm interviewing you, and then hopefully you don't see yourself. And generally speaking, like she didn't feel like she was above me because she was being interviewed by me and is, you know, somebody who is working in such a prestigious field like she is. But yeah, this was a fun conversation because I found out about Dr. Becky through another previous guest of the Videocraft Show, Desiree Martinez, her podcast, The Women of YouTube, check it out. And she had Dr. Becky on her show. And there were so many cool things that she talked about, especially in terms of like how she is creating content, thinking about like crossover appeal, finding ways to like weave science conversation into like topics that are trending in like pop culture, you know? And I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of like, you know, grow an audience.
Yeah, I really like that we had a lot of women this season. And I would have been so nervous to interview her too if I were in your shoes. Like, because she's just, but at the same time, like, she seemed just so down to earth. You know what I mean?
Yes.
She seemed so down to earth. She seemed very
normal.
Yeah, she's just like a normal...
She's just a normal person. Yeah. She really was. I'm not saying she seemed. She is just a very normal person. She just happens to be a scientist too.
Yeah, and she said that herself. She was like, I'm a scientist, but I also love nail polish and cats and Taylor Swift. And she was just like talking about how she didn't say this outright, but she is breaking stereotypes, like the stereotypical view we have of scientists with like white men with white hair, crazy hair, and who just wants to talk about science all the time. Like, she says that, you know, scientists are just normal people. We also like other things like cats and nail polish and Taylor Swift. And yeah, I love that she's making science accessible for everyone. Like, she talked about threshold fear and how that's a thing in the science community. Like, if there was like a science fair or something in your town, like, you wouldn't feel like you had anything to do with science, but she's like trying to find those crossover things that would make science more reachable and accessible to normal people who aren't scientists, I guess. And yeah, it's just amazing how, like, I know that there are scientists and doctors and lawyers and leaders out there in the world, but seeing like women in these roles, like women like Dr. Becky or AOC or even Heidelin Diaz, like the recent Filipina who won the first gold medal for the Philippines recently. Like, women in these positions of like you can see that they've really achieved something for themselves. It's like empowering to see as a woman myself. So to be able to see someone like Dr. Becky, who seemed just like so normal, such a normal girl, and to be able to just watch her like do science, like be an astrophysicist, is just empowering as a woman.
But I try and instill that in other girls now. Like, I think there is this thing in society, and lads as well, just trying to be in front of both boys and girls, showing that this is a job, this is a role that a woman inhabits, you know? But also just kind of saying, you know, society wants to cast physicists as this like lone hero, white man with crazy hair who pulls silly faces, right? And who writes on a blackboard, and the only thing they care about is physics, and that's it. That's the only thing. I like to say that there's nothing that's mutually exclusive with being a scientist, you know, whether that's a personality trait or a hobby or a gender or a race or whatever. There's nothing, right? So I am like, yeah, I'm an astrophysicist, but I love nail polish and cats and Taylor Swift and, you know, just any, you know, but I also love like scuba diving and skiing, and like there's just nothing that's, you know, holding me back from anything else. Yes. Just because I like physics doesn't mean I don't have to like something else, or it doesn't mean I can't like, you know, wearing high heels or something like that. I know the physics of the high heel when I wear it. Makes the pain all the more reasonable, because I'm like, that is why. I know that pressure is force over area.
Emily D. Baker is the next guest who I spoke to on this season of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. And Emily she is quite, she has her achievements as well, just like Dr. Becky. She was a former district attorney with Los Angeles County, and she is, she's transitioned full time into doing YouTube and really just doing like legal commentary on YouTube, primarily through streaming. And she just had, an incredible amount to say. I mean, as a lawyer, I think you really have to like talk people's ears off. And so I think Emily was obviously like very forthcoming about like her experiences of trying to get started on YouTube, why she decided to go into YouTube. And I enjoyed chatting with her. There was so much I learned, especially in particular when it comes to how to leverage live streaming, to grow her audience. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I love her personality. Like I feel like she'd be such a fun tita to have. Like tita is auntie in Tagalog. I feel like she'd be such a fun auntie, like Auntie Emily. But I love her personality. I love her purple hair, and it just changes the image we have of lawyers being serious and always talking about law in a serious manner. Like I can compare her to Dr. Becky in a way that she makes law accessible and understandable to people like us who aren't lawyers. And I like her explanation of how she breaks down complex topics and like explaining them in layman's terms. And she says that, I think she said something like, explaining complex things in a complex way is easy, but explaining complex things in a simple way is more difficult. And that's what she does every time during her live streams, that she pulls out the lawsuit documents and she breaks it down for people who are interested in law and lawsuits but don't really have the tools and the education to really understand every page and understand what's really going on behind the headlines. So it's really entertaining to watch her. Like, she's just really applying her background as a lawyer and transitioning that into something that's entertaining and also educational for YouTube.
Where does that come from for you? This attraction or magnetism to want to break down complex topics. Have you always just been somebody like that your entire life, that likes to just take something that is so complicated and then simplify it for a bunch of people to understand?
I think so. I was probably a pretty annoying kid. I won't deny that I was that kid who, when like people would get into a fight, I'd be like, so what you're saying is this and what you're saying is that, but what she's saying is this. So where's the middle of that? And even with teachers, I'm like, if I'm understanding you, and they're like, you don't need to restate what I said. I'm like, but I do need to restate what you said because I don't understand you. And me restating it helps me understand. And I don't know if it's just that it was me simplifying things so that I could better understand them. And then that's just naturally how I took to law, was let me distill this down so I can understand it in its most basic form. And because it's easy to explain complex things in a complex way, it's much harder to explain complex things in a simple way. And I think that the gatekeeping of law leads to a lot of frustration. And I also don't like misinformation, if you will. So when I see people going, oh, this is being sued over that, it's like, well, actually, that's not what it is. It's this. And in law, you can have some of that. This is the situation. This is what the law says. But it's hard for everyone to access that because it's gatekept behind hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal education. But they're the rules that govern all of our lives. And I really do think people should be able to access and understand why things are happening around them. I mean, if anything else, we are particularly in the US, we are a government of laws and lawsuits. And not having kind of some fundamental understanding of that is hard. And I think it's kind of bullshit, honestly.
Michelle Fortin is the next guest that whose episode we're going to recap here. She was episode 30 of the podcast, and she is one half of a comedic duo based in Phoenix, Arizona. They primarily do skits on the Enneagram, which was something I was not familiar with prior to finding out about her. But I came across, here's another guest who, you know, shout out to Desiree. You know, I listen to her podcast, you know, whenever I can, and just in terms of like finding guests for our podcast. But Michelle and her comedic partner Leanne were two people who I heard speak on her podcast, and I, you know, found them both very inspirational in terms of the way that they approach content. And so I reached out to them, and Leanne has been on maternity leave, and that's why Michelle was the only one to come on the podcast this go around. But this was a good conversation in terms of just seeing, like, you know, how her previous experiences kind of led to this moment where she's been able to make it on YouTube. She was previously working in journalism. We were able to kind of connect on that because I myself also used to work in journalism in the past. And then there were some other things in terms of like how they were able to kind of grow their audience through Facebook, which I was surprised to find out about, because most of the content that I found from them were on YouTube, and that's mainly where they're, you know, kind of trying to reach their audience these days. But very cool that they were able to create something too that was able to reach somebody who is very, 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 very influential here in the United States. I don't know if you know them there in the Philippines. I don't know if their shows are like popular beyond, like, you know, here in the United States, but it kind of shows you that, you know, how the reach of the internet is so wide and vast, and you never know who's going to be watching. And so the fact that her and Leanne were able to make a video that ended up getting in front of Joanna Gaines, who is a star of HGTV show Fixer Upper. They have their own network now on Discovery Plus streaming service, I believe. But it's just really cool that they were able to kind of reach that magnitude of celebrity just by making something and putting it up online. Yeah,
she did mention that they first grew on Facebook. That's where they started their content creation journey. So I looked them up on Facebook, and I was watching their video on the different diets and the bachelor style. It was funny. I was cracking up.
That was hilarious.
There were people who like represented each diet, and it was funny. But it's just so entertaining that Leanne and Michelle, they're just normal moms who just really happen to be into performing. And yeah, it's so entertaining the way that they do their skits. And she mentioned that this is just really something they have to do as moms. I feel like this is their creative outlet, and it's amazing how they're now able to build a community of actors. I think they live in Phoenix, was it?
Yeah, they live in Phoenix.
Is it Phoenix?
Arizona.
Yeah. So they now can pull from whenever they need certain roles, they can just pull from their community. And yeah, it's nice that they're able to build that sort of little family there of actors. And I feel like doing comedy is like harder than it looks. Like when I watch stand-up comedy of any sort, skits like Leanne and Michelle's, or stand-up comedy on Netflix or whatever, like it looks easy because we're laughing as part of the audience. But I feel like if you're the comedian or the performer on stage, I feel like it's super difficult because you have to like, I feel like they feel vulnerable because they don't know if the audience will laugh at their joke, but they still have to 100% go at it and 100% dedicate their energy into the jokes that they make. And I feel like it's the same thing even if it's on YouTube. Like, they don't know if people are going to find this funny, but they're going to upload it anyway. So there's a lot of courage there, I think, to do comedy. And it's nice that they found that sort of niche because they're moms. So I feel like a lot of moms can relate to their mom-related content, like homemaking and stuff like that. Their humor, yeah. So yeah, and it's amazing too that they're able to trust each other, Leanne and Michelle, because you guys also talked about their workflow and how now they usually just create their script separately and they just meet up and film. So there's a lot of trust that comes into that as well.
In terms of communicating those ideas, I imagine a lot of it is just happening like digitally. Like, are you guys just like texting each other saying, hey, I have this idea, like, yes. And then you toss it over to Leanne and she runs with it?
Texting and then email, you know, if there's a whole script we need to send, we'll Google Docs or email. Yeah, it's mostly, it honestly, a lot of it is, I don't see her side of the script until we get together. We just trust each other. And that's the the great thing about being birthed from improv is there's no good improv that happens if you don't trust your partner. And so we've come to such a point of trusting each other with our abilities and our strengths. There's actually been a few times, not very often, where we have to record independently and then our editor will edit it together. And I don't even see it till it's, ready. I'm usually the one who gives final approval on things. And I just trust it's going to come together because she does what she does so well. Yeah. So sometimes it's just that we just completely work independently on those two parts, but they work, and our audience knows which ones that we do. They've come to, appreciate that. I did a video, I collabed with another YouTuber because Leanne's on maternity leave, and the way we structured it, I had to act out a couple of the numbers that Leanne usually does, and our audience loved that. They were like, oh, it was so funny. Leanne usually does that one, and, it was fun to see you doing that one. And so it's just kind of become the rhythm that's worked in this season for us right now.
So Kristina Smallhorn was our second to last guest that I spoke to on the Videocraft Show this season. And Kristina, she's really one of the top YouTubers in the real estate niche. She, I think there are like a couple elite people up there, the Graham Steffens of the world, who is also talking about personal finance. There's Meet Kevin, there's other other people like that, but Kristina has been able to really like build a following by finding what I like to call the niche within the niche.
Yeah.
There's the wider niche of real estate at large. There's so many different topics in real estate. You can talk about foreclosures, you can talk about flipping houses, you can talk about short selling, all these kinds of different topics. And she managed to kind of narrow down and focus, find an audience that was interested in affordable housing options like tiny homes, manufactured homes, and other things, and really give people like good quality information about that, and build a pretty massive following now. She's just, when I spoke to her, she had just recently crossed like the 100,000 subscriber threshold, and I think since then now she's like closing in probably on like, by the time this episode comes out, she might be at like 150,000 subscribers.
Yeah, and she's such a no nonsense person too, and you can sense that from your conversation with her. And I like that she said that she's just 100% herself on her videos, and if that turns off certain people, then she doesn't want to do business with them, or she doesn't want them as viewers. And it's just attracting the audience that she wants by being herself, like totally herself on camera. And she applies that not only with content creation, but also in the way that she does business. And she's not afraid to be goofy and silly and just do jokes and be herself. And I feel like that's really important, because there might be a tendency for creators to want to sort of give the audience what they want instead of just being who they are and just see what the audience says about that. But she's like not afraid to be human. And she also talked about like you guys talked about like the salesiness of real estate and how certain agents are just always on script. And she's like, can you go off script for a second and just talk to me like a human being? Yeah. And I feel like she's that in her videos. She's just like straightforward and just human and just herself. And I feel like that really pays off, because we tend to have, if we're on camera a lot, there's always a tendency to like turn on like an on-camera personality, or like something you know what I mean?
For sure.
I feel like she's really dedicated to being like, just, you know what, this is who I am, and if you don't like it, then great. If you like it, then great,
Were you somebody growing up like that did like theater or like stage or anything like that? I mean, were you somebody that was making videos or filmmaking like while you were growing up?
I was just naturally a dork like that. I don't have a problem making a complete idiot out of myself. If somebody said go do it, I would do it. If somebody said don't do it, I would do it. I was just one of those people like, don't dare do that. And I'm like, oh, forget it, I'm doing it. And so when I first started doing those videos and they were goofy, there were lots of people who were like, are you sure you want to put yourself out there like that? I mean, you're kind of not really showing yourself as professional. And I'm like, I don't care. Like all I want to do is attract the people that find this kind of stuff goofy and funny like I do. And if they don't, good, then I don't want them calling me. I'd rather make less money and be happy than have more money and have to deal with people that I don't want to deal with. So
And the final person that I got to speak with on this season of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky was Lennon Bone. Now, Lennon, he actually works with previous guest who we had on the show in season 2, Tim Schmoyer. Tim is the founder of Video Creators, and Lennon is actually one of the strategists on Tim's team who work with aspiring creators trying to get to the next level with their YouTube channel and kind of really find their why behind why they're creating content. And this was a fun conversation for me because Lennon is somebody who I can find like a kinship with him just because of his views on creativity and just the idea of like his whole website is called, Stop the Starving Artist. And there is this concept throughout the history of the arts, really, that in order to pursue any kind of creative endeavor, that you kind of have to starve yourself because there's no money in that. And we live in an era now where there actually is money to do that. It's just very difficult to crack that code, as illustrated by one of the guests we talked about earlier in this recap episode, Jared Ammon Gillette. Yeah. There's a lot of opportunity out there to make some sort of living out of content, and you don't have to necessarily be a big time YouTuber with like even hundreds of thousands or even millions of subscribers to do so. And that was something that Lennon is doing a great job promoting through his content that he's making, and kind of fostering that belief in the audience that he's building too. Yeah, and you talked about this too with Owen Hamzath and Tim Schmoyer, that you don't necessarily need a big audience to make a sustainable living out of YouTube. Like you can thrive with a small community of followers who support you. And yeah, it's also, I also saw in the way he talked about building an audience, like the thing that Tim Schmoyer said about, it's not the tactics that will make you a successful YouTuber, it's the human connection, and it's the one-on-one feeling that you show through your videos. And that also, I feel like Lennon also has that philosophy. I mean, he does work with Tim Schmoyer, so I feel like that's the philosophy that they have, is that they really put importance into human connection, because a lot of times we get so caught up in the tactics and the technicalities and what will satisfy the algorithm and stuff. And it's like sort of remembering that we have to think first what we want to create and what we want to talk about, instead of putting first the algorithm and what we think the audience wants. And I really like his example about when you're buying an air conditioner, you're not just buying an air conditioner, you're buying comfort. And he talked about how it's important to sort of figure that out in terms of your content, like what feeling are you giving through your content, or what are you offering or serving the audience through your content. It's not just a video on, let's say, how to clean your air conditioner vents. Christina's still on my mind because she has a video about how to clean your vents. But it's not just a video about cleaning your vents, it's a video about building a home, for example. So it's not just the videos that we put out on YouTube, it's not just straightforward how-tos or vlogs or whatever. It's also the feeling that you give your audience, and that's really important. And I like that he put importance into that, and to the serving mindset, the service mentality, and not just sort of proving others wrong and building a life for yourself to prove the haters wrong. It's also like, what are you serving to the world, and what are you offering? What are you putting on the table? And when it comes to defining your audience, do you have an exercise or some sort of process that you go through with creators to help them really narrow down who it is that they specifically serve?
Yeah, I mean, we have... It's kind of multiple pieces. So depending on where you're at within the kind of our customer journey, like 30 days to a better YouTube channel, for instance, if you're there, we kind of get you started, like ask yourself, who's the person you want to talk to and what's the thing that they want? And then, why can't they have that thing? What's in the way? And then what's going to happen if they don't get that thing. And this is something a lot of people don't do, is they don't talk about the stakes. They don't talk about like what could happen if this person that you're trying to talk to, doesn't get what they're looking for. And I always do the whole like ask why like 3 to 5 times, so if they want to sell more air conditioners, I just come up with something. Why do they want to, or they want to buy an air conditioner? Why do they want to buy an air conditioner? Well, because, their house is overheating. They're trying to save money. Okay, that's true. But they also want to buy an air conditioner. Why? Well, because they want to make sure that their family is taken care of, right? They want to make sure that they're working from home and their kiddos are homeschooling in a pandemic. Now we're getting somewhere. Now there's like some meat on the bone where you can say, okay, there's something to talk about here that differentiates that person from every other person that wants to buy an air conditioner. And that's where you start to get into the power of like making your content for one person rather than just like a demographic.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. We went through all previous 10 guests of this third season of the show, and we've got another new season rolling out next week. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up, Nikki?
Yeah, I really like that we had a lot of women in this scene in this season. We had a lot of women compared to the earlier seasons, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed their take on things. But you realize there's not a lot of difference. They're all creators. They have the same struggles. They have the same things to worry about, things that they think about as creatives. And yeah, at the end of the day, I think my main takeaway from this season is just not being afraid to really talk about your passion online, because I feel like there's a lot of our guests this season, they come from a lot of different fields, like real estate. We have an astrophysicist, we have a lawyer, we have a musician, Lennon Bone. And they're just coming from different industries, different fields, and it's amazing that they all sort of just came together and found a community within YouTube, and they're able to really talk about their passion, or if it wasn't their original passion, they're able to like sort of transition their passion into something that can help others. Like with Lennon, he used to be a musician, and now he's sort of helping YouTubers strategize on their channel and stuff like that. So it's amazing seeing these people from different fields, different industries really come together as creatives.
Yeah, it definitely was. There's so much variety on YouTube for sure, and this is just kind of, I mean, as we go through this show and continue to go, on this journey of like meeting all these interesting people doing interesting stuff, you find that there's really room for everybody when it comes to content creation. It's really just kind of up to you in terms of your motivation and what keeps you going. So anyways, that is going to do it for this edition of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. Before we go, can you do us a favor? Can you make sure to like and comment on the video if you are watching us on YouTube? Helps us with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you are having trouble scripting your ideas, you can get a copy of our free script template. You can just go to videocraftshow.com, hit the button to get a free resource, and then just sign up to our email list, and a confirmation will be sent to your inbox, and then you will get that free script template delivered to you right as you sign up. So as always, want to thank Nikki Vicente for her help producing the show, as well as Ingrid Saraiba for her editing prowess on the videos, and Paolo Lopez taking care of all of our thumbnails and graphics on the Videocraft Show. And just a reminder for all of you out there, if you are looking to get your videos edited and look just like this, just visit videohusky.com to learn more. And we will see you again next week on another episode, another edition of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky.
Bye, guys.